Today our focus is to help review for Chapter 8. Now remember, Chapter 8 was all about exponents and the rules that go with exponents. So as we start through our review today, the first several problems are going to focus on the very beginning properties that deal with zero exponents, negative exponents, and multiplication properties of exponents. So in problem number 1, this is one where if we were to look at this number right here, this negative 8.6 is the entire base. I can tell it's the entire base because there are parentheses around it. Remember, anything with just a single base to a zero power is equal to 1. Now this is from 8.1, but remember the focus is anything that has a base raised to a zero power is going to be equal to 1. Only thing you would have to be very careful on is if your problem actually looked like this. If this was the problem that you had, this is different than the problem that's here because the negative is actually inside the parentheses, so it tells you the entire base of that is negative 8.6. In this one, we have a problem that we can solve here because the base is actually 8.6 and then the exponent is 0. So if I were to do this, this part in the box is actually equal to 1. So this one would actually be equal to negative 1. So be sure that you are looking at whether these exponents and bases are actually, the base is entirely contained in the parenthesis or not. That will make a big difference. Okay, next one. On this one, they want us to go through and simplify. And probably the easiest part for us to simplify is this part right here. 7 to the 0 power is actually equal to 1. So this part right here actually cancels down to 1. So 5 to the negative 3 times 1 is just going to be 5 to the negative 3. And remember, anytime we see that exponent that's negative up here like this one is, I'm going to put it over 1. Now my job in this one is whenever I see that negative exponent and I put it over 1, wherever it's at, it wants to move. So if this is in the top, if I want to get rid of that negative exponent, I'm going to have to move it to the bottom. So that would be 5 to the third in the bottom. And I'm going to put a 1 in the top just to keep this 5 to the third in the bottom. Now the only job that I have left is to actually put 5 to the third in there. And if I do 5 to the third, that equals 125. So my overall answer is 1 over 125. So my answer here is A. Okay, next review problem. Now this one has multiple bases. I can tell by looking at this problem that my base in each one of these is 12. Because of that, that means that my base is going to be 12 in my answer, at least to initially calculate it. And then my job is to actually take the exponents and to add them all together. Remember, this is one of those review properties of multiplication. So negative 3 plus 10 would be 7, plus 0 would be 7. So we have 12 to the 7th. Now normally I would take this and multiply it out, but I can tell by looking up here that that's really going to be enough to give me the answer. So if I didn't see 12 to the 7th in that list, then I'd want to actually take this 12 to the 7th and put it in the calculator and solve for it. Okay, next one. In this one, there are multiple things going on in this problem. There are numbers that are out in front, there are letters, and there are different letters. So first of all, there's no number in front of this A, and there's no exponent for this A. So I'm going to add those. And then this just becomes a big sorting activity. So my numbers in front are 1, 3, and 6. And then my letters, I start alphabetically, so I'm going to start with A first. So A to the 5th, and A to the 1st, and then B to the 9th. So if I were to look at this one, if I multiplied this part together, that would give me 18. And then to be able to solve for this part right here, I actually need to add those together. So 5 and 1 would give me 6. And the only b I have is at b to the 9th. So this would be my final answer. Now that means that up in this answer up here on 4, A is going to be my answer. Now remember, sorting your letters alphabetically like I did gives you a lot of advantage. First of all, you can make sure all your letters get accounted for. If you don't do them in alphabetical order, it can be very easy to overlook something or to forget something or not get it sorted correctly. So that's, something to consider. Also in this, it makes it a lot easier if you do it in alphabetical order because you're sorting, you don't really have to think twice about it. Start A's first letter, let's put it here, B's the second, and then just keep going on and on. Okay, next problem. This is a problem where we have a power outside of something that has an exponent already. So to solve this, I actually have to take these two and multiply them. So base is still going to be t. 6 times 2 is negative 12. As soon as I see that negative exponent, I'm going to put it over 1. Because of the negative exponent, this needs to move to the bottom. So that means in the bottom now it's going to be t to the 12th. And on the top I'm going to use a 1. And that's going to be my final answer. So that means up here now, C is going to be our answer. Okay, next one. Now in this one we kind of have multiple problems going on. Really, we kind of have this part right here and this problem here. So we're actually going to solve them separately down here. And then we're going to put all of our stuff together. So in this first one, if I multiply those two together, 9 times 0 is 0, so this is going to be x to the 0. Do a multiplication sign there. Then if I multiply these two together, it's going to be x to the 14th. I'm going to add my exponents together, which will give me x to the 14th. So in this one, my answer is C. Now, what you could have done back here is as soon as I got 0, we know this cancels down to 1, right? So 1 times x to the 14th is going to give me x to the 14th. So there are kind of some shortcuts along the way. So keep that in mind as you're working your way through these problems. Okay, next one. On this one, this is focused on the division property of equality. That means that if things are divided and the bases match, which in this case they do, because they're both x's, that I can subtract my exponents. So 14 minus 7 is going to be 7. So that part right there is my final answer, which means down here on number 7, A is my answer. Okay, next one. On this one, there's kind of a little bit of adjustment that needs to happen. If I were writing this and solving it myself, I noticed that the 3, the x, and the 2, everything that's in that fraction part here does not have an exponent. So I'm going to add exponents of 1. Now this is one of those problems where you do need to remember that we need to distribute the exponent of 4 to all of those. So my bases would be 3 and x and 2, at least to start with. And since they all had an exponent of 1, if I distribute this 4 to all of these, they're all going to have exponents of 4 then. So I'm going to go through and put my exponents of 4 in. Now, remember, part of our job is to actually go through and multiply that out. So if I did this 3 to the 4th, that would be 81. X to the 4th I can't do anything with. And then if I do 2 to the 4th, that's going to give me 16. Now you'll notice that could be a mixed number, but if I go and look at my answers on number 8, you're going to see that the answers are already written in that form. So our answer on this one is going to be A, because that matches this piece right here. Now you do have to remember this is kind of like a distributive property with just the exponent parts. That's the only part you have to consider. Okay, next one. In an evaluate problem. Anytime you see this evaluate here, you do need to remember that that is where you are going to plug in values. And that's something that's pretty important to remember. So if I have 9 x squared y to the negative 2, then my job is to actually look up here and see what I can plug in. So that means that I know a negative 3 is going to go in for x, and a 2 is going to go in for y. So 9 parentheses negative 3 to the second, and then 2 is going to go in here, exponent of negative 2. Now, if I look at this problem, I see this negative exponent here. So I'm going to put it over 1, grab a different color here. And this is the only one I'm happy where it's at because it's the only one that has a negative exponent. So that's going to have to go to the bottom. In this one, 9 and negative 3 to the second power don't move because we only move things that have negative exponents. So if I went to move this then, that means 9 and the negative 3 to the second power are going to stay on the top. And on the bottom, there's going to be a 2, but now the exponent's going to be positive. So now my only job that I have left to do on 9 is to actually go through and multiply everything out. So this part right here, this negative 3 squared would be negative 3 times negative 3, which is 9, times the 9 that's already there would be 81. And this 2 to the second power would be 2 times 2, which is 4. Now, if I look at this and I look up there, I know that I'm going to have to somehow deal with this mixed number. Now, I will tell you, 4 does not go evenly into 81, which means that automatically I know it can't be this one. And this is also improper, which means it's bigger than 1, which means it can't be this answer. So we kind of have two things in our favor. Now, in order to deal with this, to make it a mixed number, 4 would go into 81 20 times with 1 left over. That means this would be my final answer, which means B would be your answer here. Okay, let's see if we can squeeze in one more before our time limit comes up. This is a common ratio problem. Remember, anytime you see the word common ratio, that means that they are automatically telling you it's got to be geometric. You don't have to guess, you automatically know that, which means that something gets multiplied by over and over again in order to create the sequence that you see there. Now, if I look at this sequence, the numbers are all getting smaller, which means that I have to be multiplying by a number that is less than 1, which really takes A, B, and D off the radar as far as answers. So 1/2, multiplying by 1/2 means that I cut it in half every time. So one way that I could actually find that out is if I took negative 164 and I multiplied it by 1/2, I would want to make sure I get negative 82 back out of it. If that works, then I'd want to take negative 82, multiply that by 1/2, and see if that gives me negative 41, and it does. You want to make sure you can check out every single number that's there. So if I took negative 41 then and multiplied it by 1/2, I'd end up with negative 20.5, which means that it checks out. So every one of these values checks out. That means the number I multiplied by over and over again in this one is this 1/2. And that means that C would be my answer.